Romans had no concept of weekends. Their week was 8 days called the nundinum. Every 8th day was market day. That was the closest thing to a day off. The 7-day week we use now was only officially adopted by the Roman Empire under Emperor Constantine. Before that, different parts of the empire used completely different time structures. Rome was not one single thing. Speaking of time, Romans divided the daylight into 12 equal hours. In summer, each hour was longer. In winter, shorter. There was no such thing as a fixed-length hour until mechanical clocks in medieval Europe. When a Roman said, "Meet me at the 6th hour," that meant something different in June than it did in December. Roman emperors were frequently deified, declared gods after death, sometimes before. Emperor Caligula reportedly declared himself a living god and had his statue placed inside the temple of Castor and Pollux. He then supposedly charged worshippers' fees to speak to him as a deity. When Emperor Vespasian was dying, he reportedly said with dry humor, "Oh dear, I think I'm becoming a god." That was a man who understood the machinery behind the myth. Romans were obsessed with public toilets. They built them everywhere and used them communally. No stalls, no privacy. Dozens of seats in a row, citizens sitting elbow to elbow. In place of toilet paper, Romans used a xylospongium, a sea sponge on a stick, shared between users and rinsed in a gutter channel. Wealthy Romans sometimes brought their own personal sponge sticks. The communal ones were considered low class. Romans also had what we'd call social clubs, collegia, for virtually every trade and profession. Bakers had their own guild. Grave diggers had their own guild. Even slaves in certain households had burial clubs. The burial club was critical. If you died poor in Rome, no one would bury you. Your body would be thrown into a mass pit called a puticuli. Membership in a burial club meant you would be buried with dignity, no matter how poor you died. Romans had a concept called Otium, the sacred duty of leisure. Otium wasn't laziness. It was the time spent on philosophy, writing, thinking. The Roman elite considered it the highest form of life. Cicero wrote extensively about Otium. Without it, he argued, a man could not truly contribute to civilization. The opposite was negotium, business, duty, war. You did it so you could earn the right to odium. Rome's population was staggeringly cosmopolitan. By the 2nd century AD, people from every corner of the known world lived there. Syrians, Egyptians, Gauls, Germans, North Africans. They worshipped different gods, spoke different languages, and lived in the same apartment blocks. Emperor Septimius Severus, who ruled from 193 to 211 AD, was North African. His wife was Syrian. The idea of Rome as a purely white European civilization is a modern invention. The Romans themselves would have found it confusing. Romans had a system called the 12 Tables, one of the earliest written law codes in Western history, posted publicly in the Forum, posted in 450 BC. The idea being, the law belongs to everyone. If it's written down, no official can pretend it says something else. It didn't always work. But the principle, written, public, transparent law, shaped every legal system that came after it. Rome's sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, was built in the 6th century BC and is still partially functional today, an arch of stone built before Alexander the Great was born, still draining Rome's water. Right now, Roman children played with dolls, toy animals, and wooden swords. Archaeologists have found all of them. Roman girls were typically married between 12 and 14 years old to men decades older. The Roman writer Pliny the Younger praised his young wife's intellectual curiosity. He was 40. She was around 13 when they married. Rome normalized things we cannot. That's part of understanding it clearly. Roman soldiers were not paid in salt. Despite the popular myth, the word salary does come from the Latin salarium, but historians debate whether soldiers literally received salt. What is certain, salt was enormously valuable. Rome built entire roads, like the Via Salaria, specifically to transport it. The Roman army moved on its stomach and its feet. They built 250,000 miles of road across the empire. Roman roads were built to last. Many are still used as the base layer under modern highways. Romans had an estimated 1,400 fountains in the city of Rome alone, fed by 11 massive aqueducts. Over 1 million cubic meters of water flowed into Rome every day at the empire's peak. The poorest Romans, those in ground floor apartments, could access fountains on every street. Upper floors got nothing. Water carriers, aquarioli, made a living lugging water to upper floor tenants for a fee. Rome had one of history's earliest postal systems, the cursus publicus, established by Emperor Augustus. Relay stations were placed every 8 to 10 miles along major roads. Horses were changed. Messages moved faster than almost anything else in the ancient world. Emperor Augustus reportedly managed to communicate with distant governors within days, weeks when most people would expect months. Romans also had a form of banking. Argentari, money changers, and proto-bankers operated from booths in the forum. They accepted deposits, made loans, and issued letters of credit for merchants traveling between provinces. Rome was not a primitive economy. It had interest rates, contracts, debt courts, and financial fraud. Cicero defended clients in financial fraud cases. Some of his arguments about contract law are still studied in law schools. The Roman Empire didn't fall in a single moment. It eroded over centuries. Historians Edward Gibbon in The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire identified dozens of interlocking causes: military overstretch, currency debasement, political instability, plague. The Roman currency was debased so severely that by the 3rd century AD, a silver denarius contained less than 5% actual silver. Merchants started refusing state coins. The black market grew. Tax revenue collapsed. The crisis of the 3rd century alone saw over 50 claimants to the emperorship in 50 years. Many of them reigned for weeks, some for days. One was killed by his own soldiers 13 days after taking power. And yet, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium, survived for another 1,000 years after the West fell. Constantinople fell in 1453. To the Ottoman Empire, Roman law, Roman bureaucracy, Roman architecture, all of it carried forward. Rome never really ended. It just transformed. Into the church, into law, into language, into us. The Latin roots in your language right now. Civilization, republic, senate, public, legal, all of them came from there. Every time you say January, you're saying Janus, the two-faced god of doorways, watching both directions at once. That's what makes Rome unsettling. It isn't history. It's a mirror. Fast food, social media insults, financial fraud, political instability, wealth inequality, endless entertainment to keep people distracted. Rome had all of it 2,000 years ago, and it still fell. The question isn't whether Rome was like us. The question is whether we're paying attention. If you want to go deeper, start with Suetonius's The 12 Caesars, then Plutarch's Parallel Lives, then Gibbon. Primary sources. Not summaries. Not listicles. The actual words of people who lived inside that world. Rome will do something to you if you study it long enough. It gets under the skin. You start noticing things, patterns, echoes. The same mistakes dressed in different clothes. Rome lasted 1,000 years in the West, another 1,000 in the East. In that time, they invented things we still use, wrote things we still quote, and committed horrors we still debate. That's the honest version. Not the clean marble version you see in movies. The marble wasn't even white. Roman statues were painted in vivid color, red lips, brown skin, bright clothing. And we stripped them bare over centuries. The Rome inside your head was largely invented in the Renaissance, and reinvented again in the 19th century. The real Rome was loud. It was colorful. It smelled. It argued. It laughed at the same things we laugh at. The oldest joke we have recorded is Roman. from around the 4th century AD. It's about a barber. A barber asks a customer how he'd like his haircut. The customer replies, "In silence." 2,000 years. Same joke. Still works. That's Rome. Strange, brutal, brilliant, petty, ambitious, paranoid, and completely human. And somewhere under the streets of that city, the Cloaca Maxima is still working. Built in the 6th century BC. Still doing its job. You think you know Rome. You're just beginning.